Welcome to Scotland, Lilia Olefir, and Ash Scotland has been working with you in your role with the European Smoke-Free Partnership, and very much appreciate your coming to share some of the exciting things that are happening across Europe with us. And just to get started, could you tell me a little about how you got into tobacco work?
Thank you, Sheila, for having me. It's my pleasure to be here for Ash Scotland's Learning Week and also to talk with you today. My journey started when I was doing my master's degrees in public health, and I was looking for internship opportunities. And a friend of mine was working in the tobacco control organization in Ukraine. And then I asked her, maybe I could do internship where you are working. And she's like, yeah, probably that could be a good idea. So I've done my 3 months internship, and then they had an opening for part-time. So I started there when I was finishing my master, working part-time, finishing my master, and then I was promoted to a coordinator. And then there was an opportunity because our director was leaving and they were looking for someone to replace him. So that's how it started, and I worked in field of tobacco control in Ukraine for almost 7 years. And then in 2022 I transitioned to the Smoke-Free Partnership in Europe.
Excellent. And the UK, after a dry period, is now moving ahead with legislation on tobacco and related products like e-cigarettes. But please do tell us about some of the exciting developments you're seeing across Europe.
So Europe is not there are on the one hand countries that are making huge progress. So for example, Belgium is one of the countries that moved ahead with a comprehensive national tobacco control plan. They've got a minister, Frank van der Broeke, who is the champion for tobacco control, not just in Brussels but also at the European level. So Belgium is the country who changed their national legislation on smoke and aerosol-free environments and made more public places smoke-free. Actually, some of the outdoor areas are smoke-free from January, for example, stadium areas. And they are also planning to expand, hopefully to cover terraces, beaches. Belgium is also the country that banned nicotine pouches back in 2023. In Belgium they don't have heated tobacco products because plain packaging would be mandatory for heated tobacco products, and that was the main reason why the industry themselves sort of decided not to launch them. And also Belgium banned disposable electronic cigarettes. And Frank van der Broeke, he didn't just implement these changes at the national level, he actually called out the tobacco industry interference at the EU level. So Belgium, they had the presidency in the European Council in 2023, and they were planning to work on the revision of the smoke and aerosol-free recommendations. And then next morning, before the recommendations are planned to be launched, there was just a rumor circulating they won't be out, and he was the one who said that we need to call a spade, and the tobacco industry is a very powerful industry and that there is interference and we need to name it, we need to address the elephant in the room. Other countries that are actually moving ahead with responding to the challenges caused by new and emerging products that are not regulated, meaning that we see their promotion online, we see that those products are sold with flavors, and basically quite often there are no regulations applied to those products unless there is a policy change. So France recently went ahead with adopting a ban on nicotine pouches. They've also have a ban on disposable electronic cigarettes. But there are other countries that are not in the EU that are moving ahead. So for example, Georgia will soon have plain packaging, and for them it's a very long path, because originally they had it in their legislation like 5 years ago, and then the industry delayed it, but now finally it's happening. In Ukraine, heated tobacco products are used to be taxed at the same rates as cigarettes since 2021. And every year the tobacco industry was making attempts to reduce the excise on heated tobacco products, just simply because it was setting a precedent that the product that they call less harmful, although the WHO position is very clear that heated tobacco products need to be regulated as tobacco products, same taxes has to apply. And unfortunately, this year the industry managed to have a slightly lower rates on heated tobacco products. So there are new paths, there are new approaches that countries are taking to respond to promotion, availability of new and emerging products.
Thank you. And the tobacco industry does interfere. It's what it's always done. It tries to hold back regulation. What sort of things are you aware of them doing?
Well, I think the classic creating doubt and generating their own science. They've been very invested in that, because for them to disrupt the policy process, they need to create their own science and evidence to present it as the evidence and science. So we know that tobacco industry, through their front groups, Global Action, the former Foundation for a Smoke-Free World, Global Action on
to end smoking.
To end smoking, yes. They used to, and I think they still do, give grants. Philip Morris International gives charitable donations. So funding science, corporate social responsibility, promising investments, promising opening new production facilities in countries, and then this does open the doors for them. As well, they fund various front groups that we don't necessarily always able to find proofs that they are funded by the tobacco industry, or maybe by the intermediaries, PR companies, consultancies. There is the US based consultancy and consumer group called Consumer Choice Center. They used to have a European branch, and they were registered in the EU Transparency Register. This organization gives funding to Clearing the Air. This is a campaign led by 361 Consultancy, and the way they position themselves is to train advocates and work with decision makers to protect the rights of consumers. That's how they position themselves. Then there is World Vapor Alliance, and those consumer groups, if they wouldn't be receiving money from the Consumer Choice Center, then would they be that vocal and active, and not necessarily aiming to help smokers, but aiming to disrupt the process and using the science that is generated by the tobacco industry?
I have seen a huge proliferation in the number of tobacco-related products, which are recreational nicotine products. So not just e-cigarettes, but heated tobacco and heated herbal products, nicotine pouches, nicotine toothpicks. Why do you think the industry is coming out with all these products?
Their strategy, the strategy of the industry, is certainly to diversify and to shift the attention of the focus, because it's all clear right now to decision makers, to general public, civil society, smoking kills, that tobacco products, they have to be regulated. And actually the tobacco industry understood that they have to change something. If we look at the tobacco industry documents, since 50s and 60s, they were trying to invest in harm reduction, and they were doing that. The first attempt to introduce heated tobacco products was around 80s. But back at the time, it didn't gain the traction. But this is a very long-term strategy of the industry. On the one hand, to exploit the regulatory loopholes, because when you introduce a new product, obviously it's not in the scope of the current regulatory framework. It means that it's easy to market it online, it's easy to make it appealing to young people, and we know from the industry documents that young people, for them, are the future consumers. As simple as that. They don't view them as the future of the humanity, society. They view them as future consumers. They know that they need to get addicted sooner, because later it's unlikely. So on the one hand, they do target young people with the new products. On the other hand, they delay significantly the progress that was achieved, because it's not anymore about the traditional products that we know that they kill. They renormalize tobacco use. They've introduced, so for example, nicotine pouches. They resemble snus. Snus that is banned in the EU since 1992, and it's only legal in Sweden. But recently, Swedish Match and then PMI, British American Tobacco, they started investing in nicotine pouches. And if we would go to Eastern European countries, we would see this big displays, and not just even Eastern European countries. There are examples in Western Europe where you can see sort of traditional advertising at the point of sale of nicotine pouches, and the themes and narratives that they are using, it's pretty much the same. It's about belonging, it's about being cool, and just sort of living the best life. So what they try to sell is an addiction packaged in a shiny, promising future, when the reality is very different.
And that's the reality for health and the environment, isn't it? There's quite a lot of environment harm from some of these products as well.
Yeah, finally we've got the position of the WHO, and we've got a very strong stance of the civil society, both working on health and on environment, recognizing that cigarette filters that contain microplastic, they are just useless, and not just useless, they are harmful to users, because they create a perception of reduced risk. They make smoking more pleasurable, and it's difficult to remember, but back at the time, cigarettes were without filters, and then when the industry started producing cigarettes with filters, they were positioned as less harmful. So this is the early attempts of the industry to have a harm reduction narrative and position themselves as part of the solution, and they keep doing that. But still, I would say, although now everyone universally agrees and we are well aware that smoking kills, people simply don't know that filters, it's a scam, and then it's the most littered item globally.
It's shocking, isn't it? So going back to pouches, we've seen quite an uptake among younger people in Scotland recently with pouches. And then we hear a lot of noise, which I suspect is, well, I know is coming from industry, about how there's a Swedish miracle and pouches have solved the tobacco problem. Is that true? Is it founded?
One of our partners, Swedish Cancer Society, they are sending an alarm over, and they are trying to tell the real story, because the real story is that Sweden has implemented various policy changes. Sweden is actually one of the very few countries in Europe, if actually not the only one, who've banned smoking on terraces. Sweden, you cannot. And what the tobacco industry does, they try to erase fully all of the policy changes that were done in Sweden to reduce smoking, and say that it's only thanks to the snus, as they call it. They call snus brown snus, and nicotine pouches they call white snus. So there is also this a bit of a confusion what Swedish people mean when they say snus. They actually also mean nicotine pouches. And what we are seeing right now and hearing from our partners, this current Swedish government has rather pro-snus views. And there is a company called Swedish Match, and that company is very infamous because they were directly involved at the lobby in the European Commission back in 2012-13, asking to lift the snus ban. So since 1992, Swedish Match has been trying to lift snus ban. And then I guess one day they thought, okay, if we cannot lift the ban, why don't we create a very similar product that would be allowed? And that's what happened. But also let's not forget that in 2022, PMI acquired Swedish Match. So all the vast lobbying knowledge, all the vast resources that PMI has is now shared with Swedish Match. And when we look at the prevalence of the use of nicotine pouches in Sweden among young people 16 to 29 compared to other age groups, the prevalence is the highest among the youngest groups, reaching almost 15%. And actually, again, if we look at the stats, tobacco use in Sweden, the general population has been decreasing since 2004, and then there was a switch in 2012-13, and it started, and the daily use of snus started increasing. So also, what the industry is trying to do, they try to portray Sweden as the miracle story of success, and the solution is very simple, just the product. The solution, if we are unsure who's behind, we need to look what is the solution. If solution is another product that is not licensed as a nicotine replacement therapy, then I think we have to be very cautious.
Absolutely agree with you, because they sell us the problem, and then when people start waking up to the harms, they sell us so-called solutions that make them more profits, and then by the time we wake up to the harms of those, they're off down the road with something else. So I think you're right. In Scotland, I feel we've got a real gap at the moment in data about what's happening with children and young people and tracking it through over a long period of time. So do you find that you have enough data in terms of the work you're doing? Are there gaps?
I would say with new and emerging products, there is sort of a lack of data when it comes to various products and how they're being used by teenagers, patterns of use, accessibility. So I think there are a couple of global surveys that are done capturing quite many countries. But then it's done every 3-4 years, and what we see in 3-4 years, we get the new products that then are not captured by that specific survey. And although we understand that even, for example, for nicotine pouches, they are mostly prevalent in Sweden, but then we see a higher percentage, for example, in Austria, and it's quite surprising why Austria. So we sort of, it's important for us to understand the speed with which the product is being promoted, and at the same time compare how one countries are doing to another. So I think what the industry is also sort of doing, dividing and conquering, because different parts of Europe are subjected to different products, it almost feels like there is some sort of market research done to figure out which products have better chances to be better perceived by consumers in specific countries.
That's interesting, and it would not surprise me that they're using different places to test products and approaches, and then when they find one that works, they kind of roll it out to everyone else. I'm going to ask you a very open question, and knowing that English isn't your first language, so feel free to take a pause or not to answer it, but you've just recently met us in Scotland, you've heard some of the things that are happening here and in the UK. If I was to ask you if you had a magic wand to give us whatever we need in Scotland at this point, what sorts of things would you focus us on? What should we think about doing going forward?
I think you are doing everything that is in your power right now, but obviously having champions among decision makers and them having the courage to do the right thing, because they know what is the right thing. But as decision makers change, at some point you have those that are very driven, very motivated, and they say things out and they move ahead with some might call at some point maybe unpopular opinions, because again what the industry is trying to say that if you regulate, then it's a nanny state and you don't listen to consumers, but the reality again is very different. So I would rather say that patience and dedication.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience and dedication and courage at European level and in helping us come together and focus what are very limited resources against a massive set of multinational corporations with loads of money and very few morals and ethics. So Lilia, many thanks for speaking with me today and for coming to Scotland to share your thoughts and experience.
Thank you, Sheila.